Are you a person that is trying to become more conscious? Well, a big block to that is the idea that you shouldn't judge other people. You shouldn't judge this person. You shouldn't judge other people. Who are you to judge other people? Well, here's the crazy thing about it. The ego never stops judging people. The ego constantly judges you, other people, but the ego also has this fail-safe mechanism. It says you shouldn't judge other people. Judging is wrong. Judging is bad, but the ego never stops fucking doing it. So many people are stuck in this loop of they're judging people. They don't know they're judging people. So they're stuck because judging is bad. When I make videos about certain spiritual gurus, invariably people tell me, Patrick, you shouldn't judge people. Evolved people don't judge people. And I'm like, I'm not though. Why are you seeing it as a judgment? We're going to talk about that today. We're going to watch a video from Eckhart Tolle, and we're going to develop a process of how to get through what many people perceive as judgment, but it's actually just good discernment. Being able to set boundaries. That's the highest spiritual attainment. Of course, we don't judge people here. What do you think this is? I don't judge people, though. I have talked to people about what's going on with them, and they'll say, "You're judging me, Patrick." I'm like, I don't judge you. I'm a formless. That too. I'm a former homeless sex meth addict. I'm in no position to judge people. I'm not. I wouldn't judge people. So what am I doing here? Aren't you curious about that at all? If I'm not judging people, what am I doing here? Maybe deciding what is appropriate for me in my life, like everybody should be doing. That's normal. That's natural. I'm going to go in depth on this today, probably a little bit too hard, but by the end of this episode, I want you to say, it's okay to judge people. You should be judging people. It's natural to judge what you want in your life and what you don't want in your life. The ego gets that all fucking twisted. It sure does. So today on this episode, we're going to judge away. We're going to judge so hard, people might even start crying. Are you ready? Let's go.
He was once a storm in human form, sharp tongue, cold soul, heart worn and torn, living like a ghost who missed his grave till the spirit sang out and called him brave. He got rewired by the great unknown, heard the call like a dial tone to the bone. So pull up a chair, enjoy the glow. This is the Shaman Patrick Show.
There really are two types of people in this world. There really is. There are people who have recognized that they have an ego and they've stepped beyond it and they work on their ego issues. And then the other type are those who are still in ego consciousness. It's that simple. There's two types of people. And so the thing about this is, you can recognize that you have an ego just one time. That's all it takes, one time. And then once you recognize that you have an ego that one time, your work then becomes about removing all the conditioning, all the programming, all the weird beliefs, the weird ideas. Because in ego consciousness, certain things make sense. When you're no longer in ego consciousness, those things take on different meanings. They don't mean the same thing. And I know that most people in the world are still grappling with ego issues. I myself am still grappling with conditioning and programming, if not in myself, in other people. So you can know this, that there's a different frame of reference depending upon where you are. It is that simple. Now, recognizing that you have an ego is the most difficult part. Most people will never get there. Most people will want to be there. But to realize that you have an ego means the death of almost everything that you know. It also means the death of the relationships that you held so dear, because you realize that you just can't live in that state anymore. It doesn't mean that you're any better or any worse. The scales fall from your eyes. You see reality somewhat as it actually is. You don't take things so seriously. But also, when the ego is no longer ruling or running your life, you can decide what you want in your life. You can decide the types of people you want in your life. You'll be able to set boundaries easily. You also don't get triggered as much. Things are no big deal. Somebody will come up to you and say, "Did you see what was on the news?" And you'll know from this place, well, everything on the news is ego. The ego is not real. The ego's a lie. Why pay attention to stuff that's not even real? And for those of you like myself who got sucked in to what Aubrey Marcus was doing, I've made a few videos. The videos I make about Aubrey Marcus tend to do really well. And the reason is because it connects with people who are kind of waking up to this spiritual ego, word salad, nonsense nightmare that people have been in. I myself was in it, because here's what's going to happen to you. If you recognize that you have an ego, that one time, you might experience a moment of bliss. You know, this can happen through psychedelic use. This can happen through drug use. When you take drugs, when you do psychedelics, you get relief from that ego's constant judging, constant negativity, that constant insanity. You get a relief from that. And so that's what makes you high. Because you get relief from the ego, that's what makes you high. Because the ego keeps this shit on lockdown. The ego keeps good feelings on lockdown. The ego is the root of all human suffering. Happy birthday. Now you know. The ego is the culprit behind it all. It's why it's on the cover of this book. A searing takedown of humanity's greatest threat. It's not the drugs. It's not the wars. It's not the cult leaders. It's the ego at the heart of it. We get real simple about this shit. So the reason that Aubrey Marcus is so popular among people like ourselves is because it's exposed the spiritual ego that takes people over when they get some relief from the ego, because the ego is constantly going to keep coming up with new strategies to stay hidden. It's gonna keep at it. That's why that book is written like a war manual. Like, the ego will not be able to survive after that book in you. It's our process of how we work through it. And I would love it if everybody could get a copy of that book. And if you want a copy of that book, you can get it on our website at concreteshamans.com. Buy two, give one to a friend. Get it, read it, wake the fuck up. Because it's a handbook that exposes the sneaky ways the ego runs the show, keeps you stuck, and hijacks your healing. And at the end of the day, our good friend Aubrey Marcus is a man who does drugs, is somewhat delusional, cheats, manipulates, gaslights, and we're not judging him for that, because I know that that underneath it all, Mr. Aubrey Marcus is probably a really good guy. But that spiritual ego and the inability to do shadow work, much in addition to having such a cum-soaked overemphasis on sex brain, Aubrey Marcus is just a little warped. And that happens when the spiritual ego takes you over. Here in America, we don't have like a spiritual mentorship program. Like, you got to luck into having a really good mentor. Like, luckily for me, I've had some really good mentors in my life. I've had a sponsor that mentored me. I mean, when I got a sponsor in AA, and I feel comfortable talking about my experience in AA because I am a person who works with people in recovery. Normally, we wouldn't talk about this at all. But I can talk about my experience in it because it is in the service of truth and recovery. I am not a spokesperson for it. But at the same time, my sponsor helped clear up a lot of delusions for me. It was brutal. It was awful to sit there and realize that everything I knew was a lie. I gave my sponsor so many excuses. Let me give you an example of what that was like. So I had a home invasion, which I've talked about. And after that was over, I admitted that I might need a sponsor. See, I went to meetings since 1994. And I kept thinking I didn't need a sponsor. I didn't need a mentor. And when I had my spiritual awakening, I was still drinking and still doing drugs, but I thought I didn't need to do the step. I just didn't need to do that part. I've had a spiritual awakening. You see? I don't need that. So I don't need that at all. More evolved than you. More evolved. Like, I've had a spiritual awakening. So, but I also knew that I probably needed to go ahead and do those steps. You need somebody to take you through those steps because the ego is delusional. And that's all an addiction is an overactive ego. So the ego has to break. So the 12 steps are a way to dismantle that ego. Now, I've talked to drug addicts who don't believe in any of that at all. They think it's crazy to dismantle the ego. Well, the ego would think it was crazy to dismantle the ego, but it does. Step 1, admitted we were powerless over drugs and alcohol. But what you're actually admitting is that you're powerless over the ego. It's just called alcoholism, but it's really egoism. There you go. Happy birthday. But through those steps, at the last step is having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. And I heard that one day in a meeting. I was like, oh, so there's different spiritual awakenings. There's like that first initial spiritual awakening, but you can continue to have spiritual awakenings around a variety of subjects. Oh, and this spiritual awakening that you get as a result of doing those steps, you can't get anywhere else. Through that alchemical healing, you can't get that particular spiritual awakening through any other means. And at that point, I was like, I want that spiritual awakening. I want the spiritual awakening as a result of those steps. And I got a sponsor to help take me through the steps. And a sponsor is not your friend. You don't go out to dinner with them. You don't do anything like that. He's not your friend, although my sponsor was really handsome. And he was really handsome, and I thought that would make it easier because I was sick and twisted at that time. I was like, I want a good-looking sponsor because I looked at people like that. I judged people on their looks and how much money they had. But I'm telling you, all that's over now. And how did it get over? Well, I'm going to be brutally honest with you about this. I'm going to be brutally honest with you about my 4th step. The 4th step is when you do a personal moral inventory, where you have to see what a big piece of shit you actually are. Most people bail at that part. Most people bail when they're faced with having to list all of their flaws. And my sponsor, one of the things that I had to do for my 4th step was I had to write my sex and relationship history. And I had to list all the romantic and it was, my sponsor was also gay. And I said, how am I supposed to list all my sexual partners? I don't even know some of their names. Like, I can't even remember all my sexual partners. How am I? He goes, just list the ones that you had a significant relationship with. And then you list why you were with them. And you list why you resent them. And see, I had the uncanny luck to have gotten into a series of abusive relationships. And so I listed all of the significant relationships I had. I also listed, honestly, the things I liked about them. And I also listed the resentment that I had. That, like, why? Now, a 4th step is going to separate the men from the boys. And that's why you can tell when people haven't done that. You can tell when people haven't looked in themselves, seen where they're fucked up. You can really tell that because people who haven't done that tend to project onto other people. They project all their shit onto other people. And so I did my inventory, and then I went to meet with my sponsor. And while I was really unprepared as to what was going to happen as a result of this. I didn't know it would forever change my life. I didn't know that my life was going to end that day. I didn't know. At the time that I did my fourth step, I was dating Merrick, very early dating, like, because I didn't think that this fourth step was going to have that big of a significant effect on me. I thought I'm just doing a step, I did the first step, second, third step, came to believe a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I was ready to be restored to sanity because I could admit that the way I was living was insane. Taking drugs, drinking, having sex with lots of different people, men and women. I knew that was insane, an insane way to live. And I wanted to live in sanity. Also, I had spent enough time around sober people, and I was like, I want what they have. I want a nice haircut. I want nice things. They have jobs. I want that. I want that. So as I sat down to do the fourth step with my sponsor, I was shaking. I was nervous, and he wanted me to read it out, and he went over it with me, and he just kind of sat there like this, looking good though, looking handsome, and just looking at me, kind of, oh well. Here we go again. Another fag trying to get sober. He really didn't think I was going to make it. He really had such little faith that I was going to make it. And so I read my resentments. I read why I was with these guys, and something started to dawn on me that there was something similar among every one of the guys that I was with. They tended to have large members, which was a reason. I tended to like big dicks who were usually attached to bigger dicks, if you know what I mean. I also liked men with resources, with money, a nice car, that kind of thing. And it slowly dawned on me that every guy that I was with, that I had used. Like, they didn't matter. Only their dicks, money, whatever they could do for me mattered. And then another horrifying realization happened, that they were not abusive towards me. I was using them. I was crazy. I was the bad guy. You see? That what I interpreted as abusive behavior was them setting boundaries with me, them protecting themselves against my crazy, alcoholic, drug addicted ass. And my world fell apart in that moment. I realized, oh God, I'm the bad guy. Oh my God, I'm a horrible person. Oh my God. It blew my mind. I realized I had been a liar. I had been a thief. I had been a cheat. I was a terrible, terrible person. And my sponsor was like, don't be so dramatic. And I was so terrified to tell him these things. And he was basically like, is that it? Is that all you got? I'm like crying. I'm like, oh my God, I can't deal with this. I'm such a horrible person. He's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. Relax. We got to go to this meeting. He was just like acting like it was no big deal. My whole life fell apart that day. I was like, oh my God, I'm a terrible person. I'm a terrible person. Oh my God, what am I going to do? So I'm in the meeting, and I'm not dealing well. I'm not dealing with things well. At the meeting, they prayed to Satan. I've never seen this in a meeting. I've never seen it since. They did the prayer to Satan, and I'm like, oh fuck, it's oh God, oh God. It was driving me crazy. I was hearing whispers from people. I would come to find out that was my ego falling apart. Like it would, because when the ego falls apart, you get all this, it's very, the ego gives everything it got, everything it can throw at you. That fourth step just blew that ego apart. It was already blown apart to some degree, but the ego, the alcoholic ego in me, and another layer of it, I was terrified. I fled the meeting. My sponsors texted me like, where are you going? Are you okay? I got to get to my apartment. At my apartment, Merrick is there. He's making dinner for me to celebrate me doing my fourth step. I am going to that apartment to implore him to get far away from me. I get to my apartment. I run up the stairs. I come in and I'm like, you have got to get away from me. I am a terrible person. I have used everybody that I have ever been with. You have got to get away from me. I don't want to use you. I don't want to use you. I'm a terrible person. I'm a liar. Please, you've got to get far away from me before I drag you down with me. Now, Merrick had already been through this. He had a similar reaction. Most people who do their fourth step, if you do a really good fourth step, you'll probably want to die. So he's like, relax. You're okay. It's fine. You're not a bad person. You're not a bad person. But now you know. Now you know what every sober alcoholic knows, that we were a piece of shit. And guess what? You don't have to live that way anymore. You're not using me, Patrick, is what he said. You're not using anybody anymore. You're not going to do it. Once you know you're a liar, you're probably not going to lie anymore. It's okay. And you know what? It was. It was. However, when you do clear all that shit up, it kind of puts you in this phase of existence where you see things a little bit clearer than people who have not done that kind of stuff on themselves. You know, the fourth step is like an extreme sulfuric acid wash version of shadow work. The overwhelming vast majority of people alive today will not be able to do that. They will not be able and to do essentially this, which is like just taking a look in a mirror, just glancing in a mirror, seeing, oh God, I'm a monster. Very few people will be able to do that. And because they will be unable to do that, they will probably drink themselves to death, succumb to an unnecessary health issue, continue to cause a lot of damage in the lives of the people that they say they love, do drugs, sexually act out, gaslight, all that kind of stuff that's associated with someone who is a drug addict and an alcoholic. It's the behavior. So when I call somebody an alcoholic or a drug addict, it's just because I recognize it in them. I'm not judging them. It's recognition. What's up, girl? We have a saying, you spot it, you got it. So you know who's an addict and an alcoholic based on their behavior. They speak a certain way. There's a word salad, especially if somebody knows the jig is up and they know that they're going to get exposed for being alcoholic and an addict. And it's an ego thing too. It's not even like alcoholism is egoism. Again, I'm going to tell it to you. It all comes from the ego, all of it, each and every one. They don't want to be known as an alcoholic or an addict. So they'll come up with all these cockamamie theories and schemes and all of this. And I just tell me, just be an alcoholic. It's so much easier. It's so much easier. You don't have to come up with all these people will come up with new theories and new ways of doing it. They'll just all these theories and pamphlets and programs. You know, I went to Smart Recovery for 2 years, and you know what I saw in Smart Recovery? People relapsing, people dying. I mean, when you get sober, you see a lot of the people that you used to know die. They just die from overdoses, all that kind of stuff. And eventually you just see it. You just recognize addiction, much in the same way that you can recognize someone who has been narcissistically abused, which I can also recognize having been narcissistically abused myself. It's like when you see the wolf tracks, you know that there's probably a wolf. And you don't judge people. That's not judging people. That's a recognition. And sometimes people will say, well, Patrick, I can't believe you admit that you're an alcoholic. And I'm like, it's like diabetes. It's like anything else. It just doesn't define me. It's not who I am. It's part of my story. It's part of my experience. It's part of how I came to consciousness. Because addiction and alcoholism is an initiation into that higher consciousness. As soon as I knew I was an alcoholic, I'm like, oh, okay, now I know what's wrong with me. Now I know what to do about this particular thing. And that's what we do. But the ego, alcoholism, egoism, the ego thinks that alcoholic is a bad thing. An addict is a bad thing. Because of course it would. Because alcohol and drugs are fuel for that ego. Keeps that ego going. It's fuel for that shit. So if you take away the alcohol, the ego gets exposed. You take away the drugs, the ego gets exposed. And the ego will not be exposed. So as soon as you call somebody an addict or an alcoholic, they're not going to be able to do those drugs anymore. That's why people resist that label. So when people say, I can't believe that you admit that you're an alcoholic, I'm like, what's wrong with being an alcoholic? What's wrong with being an addict? Thank God I know what's going on with me. And besides, I don't have to buy overpriced cocktails at bars that I don't even really want to go to anymore because everybody that's in a bar is sick emotionally. Why would I want to go hang out with sick people? I don't. Thank you very, very much. So sober people get to know themselves really well because we have to. We have to be honest, and we don't judge people. We don't. I don't judge people. I don't. I recognize things in me, in other people, in myself. And so when you're recognizing things in other people, you're not judging them. And I think the best way to get there is to just judge people. Judge them until you get to the indestructible part of them. Because people are not their behavior. And I definitely do not boil people down into being just an addict or just an alcoholic. No, people are way too complex. People are way too beautiful, but we can often confuse people for their behavior. We're going to watch a video from Eckhart Tolle later about this topic, but I do want to highlight this comment that I got from somebody. I largely on the Aubrey Marcus videos, I get really good comments from people who are using this situation as a sort of sacred shadow work. But every now and then there's a comment from somebody, and we're going to see what that's all about. Patrick, you just don't get it. You just don't understand. This comment is basically saying, I blur out the names of the comments because I don't want to call people out, but I also do. This person says, you should also understand everyone has their own soul's journey. Don't judge others, even if they do something that you wouldn't do or think differently. If you are really spiritually evolved, you should know that. And I'd like to say about this, I commented, of course, but if they do something that you wouldn't, well, they're doing something that if they were in their right mind, they wouldn't be doing anyway. If they were conscious, they wouldn't be doing it. They're lying about it. They're lying about being conscious. So of course we know that every soul is on their own journey. We also know that the soul's journey is towards moral perfection. Gaslighting, lying, manipulating, addiction, and sexually acting out are not just choosing to live differently. I'm going to expound upon that. In concrete shamanism, we understand that we're on a progression of spirits. We're part of the progression of spirits. Do y'all know about this book, the Spirits book? Spiritism. Spiritism is not concrete shamanism, but they share similar things. And we're progressing towards moral purity and perfection, spiritual perfection. And one of the things that we don't do, especially when we're sober, is lie, manipulate, gaslight, or we're not just choosing to, nobody who's doing that is choosing to live differently. They're fucking sick. And being able to discern whether you want that shit in your life or not is of the highest spiritual attainment. People can choose to stab their own eyes out, but we don't have to support them in it. Being spiritual beings, we might even say, oh God, please put down the knife and get some help, girl. So yes, we're not judging people when we notice that they're doing things that hurt themselves or other people. We're not judging. We're noticing. We're recognizing it. But I know that egos will stick up for other egos, and drug addicts can be very, very convincing. When my loved one decided to go use psychedelics after being sober for a few years and explore this new facet of life in a spiritual way, he accused me of judging him, of not understanding. I don't get it. And I will stand by this. The drugs are not necessary. The drugs can make things a lot worse. You want to have clarity when you're healing. You don't want to be numbed out. Plus, you don't want the possibility that someone can slip you a roofie and assault you. Why do people fight so hard to cleave to this lifestyle? Why did I cleave to it? I didn't know I was hurting myself. I didn't know I thought it was my right. I thought I'm just choosing to live differently. Nobody cared enough about me to say, Patrick, you're stabbing your eyes out. Put down the knife. No one cared about me enough. So I cared enough about my loved one to fucking say something. And I was motherfucking disturbed when his parents and the rest of his family let him do whatever he wants, supported it. Well, he's taking a different road. He's taking a different path. I hope he doesn't die. And I hope he doesn't piss off the wrong people. I hope he doesn't home wreck. I hope he doesn't do all that. But if he does, yes, it is his soul's journey. Of course it is. I just didn't want to be lied to or gaslit or manipulated. I personally don't want that shit in my life. Even spiritual masters keep a clean temple. You can't go into a temple, start pissing all over the floor. And my peace is worth protecting now. And that is being spiritually evolved. Honey. But I wouldn't use that term to describe this. And I love it. If you are really spiritually evolved, you should know that. Well, honey, conscious people don't do drugs. Conscious people have no need for drugs. There's no need. You can't add anything to my experience to help with that. I'm getting a phone call. I'll be right back. Do you know what theme song that is? Now, you might say, well, Patrick, if you're recording videos, why don't you put your phone on silent? Well, when an alcoholic calls, I always answer, because that's the thing about being sober and knowing you're an alcoholic, because I could call anybody. I got over 300 names in my phone, and I could call anybody right now. If I'm having an issue or a problem, I can call people. I have the resource. I have mentors. I got people who know their shit. I could call them and say, hey, I'm having this issue with something. And that's what you get into when you enter that sacred brotherhood and sisterhood, so to speak. You'll never be alone again. That's for damn sure. And if you're doing something fucked up, people are going to set you right. So when I was in Chicago and going to meetings, if I came in there with some cockamamie shit like being depressed or complaining about something or just being stupid, you would get called out for that shit immediately. I never felt judged. I was like, thank you for calling me out on my bullshit. Thank you for not co-signing my bullshit. And you can't bullshit a bullshitter. Have you ever heard that before? But before we watch the video from Eckhart, I will tell you, there was, I was at a meeting once, and there was this guy. He used to sit with me, and then one time we were outside. There was a terrace at this place, and before the meeting, we would go out there and smoke and swap stories. And he was new to recovery. I'd been going since 1994. I didn't get sober until 2018. Do you see how fucking screwed up I was? So he said, you know, I feel judged when I come to these meetings. I'm like, judged by this group of assholes? You feel judged by these people? And he's like, yeah, I just feel judged. I'm like, oh God, no. Alcoholics don't judge people. Addicts don't judge. No. What you're feeling is you are judging people. If you think that you're being judged, or if you think other people are judging other people, that's because you're the one doing the judging. And he just looked at me, and he avoided me for the rest of the time that I ever knew him, because that's really disturbing for people. So if you think I'm judging people, that's because you're doing the judging. When we recognize that something is going on with somebody, we are not judging them. But you do not have to take my word for it. You can say, Patrick, you don't understand. You don't understand, Patrick. You just don't get it. You're not getting it. You're just not getting it. So now let's hear from Eckhart. Like, I love Eckhart. People with strong egos can't stand Eckhart. Every time I play an Eckhart video, I get copyright strike, but that's okay. I don't mind sending some dollars Mr. Eckhart's way. I don't mind. I don't mind at all. But we're gonna watch this video from him. It's called If We Say the World is Crazy, Are We Judging? So let's hear from a spiritual master about this, all right? Let me go to the beginning. And we'll play this lovely sound. I love this sound.
If we say the world is crazy, are we judging? No. It actually is crazy.
And I love that, because, you know, when you say somebody is gaslighting, are you judging them? No, because that's what they're doing. It seems really simple, right? Too simple for a lot of people. Maybe.
So how is that not a judgment? What judgment really means in spiritual terms is to equate something that you see in another, a deficiency, a characteristic that is regarded as not so good, to equate that with who that person is in their essence, their identity. If you see unconsciousness in another human being, which you can do easily, unconscious behavior, either in an individual human being, they get insanely angry, they get depressed, they misinterpret everything, they project their insecurities onto you, they project their fears onto somebody else, they make enemies everywhere, complete. And when it would be absurd to say, oh no, this person is fine, I'm not judging you. But you can clearly see that the behavior is totally irrational and insane and creates continuous suffering for themselves and others. So you see that. Whether or not you verbalize it is secondary, but you see it, and you might say this person is unconscious, which it does not mean you equate their behavior or what they do with who they are. If you make an identity out of it, then it's a judgment.
So, so basically, you know, if you see somebody sexually acting out, they're not a terrible person. They're just sexually acting out. That's it. Like if somebody is an alcoholic or an addict or a druggie or a swinger, you know, you're not saying that anything that they're doing is necessarily wrong. You're not equating that behavior with their identity. Just because somebody lies a lot doesn't mean that they're a liar. Like my father he was kind of a terrible person. But at the same time, I knew that he probably was not a terrible person to everybody. Like when my mom died, he had a girlfriend. Probably he had the girlfriend before my mom died. But so obviously she saw something in him that she liked. So he wasn't a completely terrible person. He was just a terrible person to me. And being able to see that. Like, he may have treated my sisters differently than he treated me. That's why they might have had a different experience. That might be why they got so upset when I said, you got to forgive mom and dad. What do we have to forgive them for? So you're not judging people when you notice their behaviors. And discernment is when you decide if you want that in your inner circle or in your life, or even if you even want to pay attention to it. I mean, do you want the people you learn life skills from, do you want them to be drunk? Do you want them to be going through divorces? Do you want them to be having three-ways? Or who do you want to pay attention to? It's up to you. If you want to listen to druggies, go right ahead. Nobody's going to judge you for listening to a druggie. But at the same time, is what do you want? I don't judge people for doing drugs. Have at it. Snort your coke off people's dicks if you want to. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care. The only thing that bothers me is when people piss down my back and tell me that it's raining. That's where I get a little. When people tell me that sticking your dick in as many people as you want to is an evolution. It's actually not an evolution. It's a descension into lower consciousness. That's what it is. Conscious people don't do shit like that. Conscious people don't do drugs. They have no need to do drugs. So when you recognize that someone is acting in an unconscious way, you're not judging them. You're just like, oh, that's all that's going on.
So if I said human beings are crazy, that would probably be a judgment. But if I see their behavior as crazy and realize that is the egoic mind operating in them, they are manifesting behavior that corresponds to the present evolutionary stage of human consciousness. It is not who they are. It is the way in which they manifest the unconsciousness that is still part of the collective human consciousness. That's all. So basically the answer is when it's not equated with who they are, when you are not making an identity for them out of whatever behavior they manifest, then it's not a judgment. The judgment becomes when you say he is or she is such and such. He's a liar. Let's say that. He's a liar. That's the judgment. He often lies is not a judgment. Because you can see that the lying is something that is a manifest.
And so you can notice that somebody is addicted to sex or drugs or alcohol or lying. And you can know that it's just the addiction. It's not actually them. And so when I call myself an alcoholic, I'm not labeling myself. If other people call me an alcoholic, I don't feel judged because that's something that's going on with me. It's not the total sum of who I am. Same thing with being a shaman. There are times in my life when I'm doing shaman stuff, and you can tell that I'm doing shaman stuff, but it's just like it's my behavior. Who I really am is more than a shaman. It's more than Patrick. It's more than a human. It's more than any of that stuff. So when you notice the behavior of others and you don't ascribe it to their entire identity, then you're not judging them. So to sum up, what Eckhart is saying there is that, if you say he's a liar, he's a cheat, he's a thief, well, people are more than that. People are way more than that. So in a way, it's really impossible to judge people, but you can judge their behavior and decide if you want that shit in your life or for yourself. A person in their right mind would not want people in their life sabotaging them or hurting them or causing them financial problems or cheating on them. Most people in their right mind would not want that. But the ego can convince you that calling out their bad behavior is judging them. This is the path I chose. The path I chose was, I've heard somebody say this recently, my path is one of sexual freedom. My path is one of taking lots of drugs and convincing women to have sex with me when they don't really want to. That's the path I chose. Why are you judging me for the path I chose? I'm not judging you for the path that you chose, but have fun with that path. Have fun with promiscuity and drug addiction and have fun with that. I hope you survive it. You're not judging people when you're doing that. You're saying you could possibly be stabbing yourself in the eyes. Please don't do that. So the ego is going to get all of this twisted. The ego will say, you're not supporting me because you're judging me. Are you supposed to support people doing illegal drugs, knowing the consequences of doing those types of illegal drugs like that? How are you judging somebody when you want people to be safe and happy? I don't know what to do with my hair, so I'm judging myself for my hair.
Station of his egoic state of consciousness for him. He believes, presumably, that he can gain some advantage from telling things that are not true, enhancing himself or whatever. Many egos say things that are not true to enhance themselves, for example. But the moment I make it into an identity, he is a liar, that's a huge trap I have put myself in, not just him. I've put myself in because I've made an identity for another human being out of their unconscious behavior. Once I've done that, once I have attached a huge label, mental label, onto another human being, next time I meet this human being, I'm not really meeting them anymore. I'm meeting my judgment. I'm looking at them through the screen of the label that I have already given them, that I've mentioned to others. Do you know what you know that he's a liar, don't you? Yeah, okay, here. Next time he comes, you're not meeting a human being, you're meeting a liar. And by doing that, you have yourself reduced yourself. You get trapped in your own judgments. The way in which you relate to this person is diminished. You're not relating freely anymore to that person. You yourself become constrained by your judgments, because it will then control this, the mental concept will control your behavior towards him also.
And that's where we get really kind of screwed up. My loved one that relapsed and convinced me. He laid the groundwork for this, by the way. And the groundwork was laid by telling people that I was in relationship, that I was overbearing, that I was pushy, that I was bossy. And I did nothing but support this person, lavish them with gifts, really, really tried to help them through their early days of recovery. And all the while he's planting the seeds to make it look like I'm the crazy one, or that I'm pushy, that I am impressing sobriety on him. And that's not true at all. I've told him, like, if you want to relapse, relapse. You don't have to lie about it. You don't have to set it up. You don't have to destroy the relationships that I have with other people. But it got so bad that when it actually did happen, and I tried to talk to other people about it, they were already captured. I couldn't have honest conversations with them. I couldn't have an honest conversation with his father, because he had told his father, he's trying to push sobriety on me. I'm not really an alcoholic. I'm not really an addict. And that's great, but alcoholics lie. Alcoholics manipulate. Alcoholics steal. I don't care if people are do drugs or not. Don't get it twisted. Go down that road. See what you get. See that you don't really need them. Hopefully they won't kill you. But I definitely do not push people into being sober if they don't want to. But an alcoholic who doesn't want to stay sober would definitely tell other people that I didn't know what I was talking about, that I didn't understand addiction or alcoholism, that I just I needed other people to be an alcoholic just like me. No, not everybody is an alcoholic or an addict. There are certain behaviors that you notice in people, but that was a big excuse that Patrick just needs others to be alcoholic, to be just as sick as him. No, I want everybody to be well. There are people in this world who are not alcoholics. They can have a glass of wine. They can smoke a joint every now and then. They don't need it. They don't need it. I actually don't need it anymore either. I'm actually not an alcoholic anymore. I just say it because it's simple. It's simple. It's simple. But it's very unlikely that I'll return to drinking or doing drugs because I don't need them. They don't add anything to my life now. I think it would be crazy. And in fact, if I ever have to take a pain pill for any reason, like for dental work or anything, I don't like it. I hate it. I don't like being altered anymore. I used to crave that shit. And so, somebody who has that twisted ego is going to be very manipulative, is going to lay the groundwork. And the alcoholic that called me, we were talking about this person and we're like, man, they really tried to destroy our support system. They tried to turn people against us, and they succeeded. There's like in the space of just a week, all people we used to know, people we used to have friends with are accusing us of trying to push something onto him. Like they were even saying he didn't relapse. And meanwhile, we're like, what the fuck has happened? Because drug addicts can be very, very, very convincing. And we're like, oh. So we had to walk away from many relationships because we were judging people. We were judging people's choices. We were judging their path. No, we're not. Do what you want. Because if this person had truly chosen a different path, they wouldn't have needed to lie about it. They wouldn't have needed to manipulate over it. I told people, like, I would still be open to hearing how mushrooms and psychedelics could be beneficial. I would be open to hearing evidence from that. So far, I just get a bunch of cockamamie excuses, and I would never encourage anybody to do illegal substances, regardless of how I felt, whether or not those substances should be legal or not, because sober people don't take illegal drugs. That's kind of the main thing. Nobody in their right mind would take an illegal drug, whether they thought it should be legal or not. The laws are what they are. And that's being conscious. A conscious person wouldn't take illegal drugs either.
So, as that's why I believe it was Jesus said, when you judge, you judge yourself, or something like that. So there we need to be careful when we make pronouncements about others, when we transform their behavior that we deem unconscious into an identity for them. Now that becomes extreme when somebody is extremely unconscious. Even then it applies. He's a thief. Now it may be true that his living is by stealing things, but you need to be careful with these things, because it could be that this person suddenly realizes, perhaps in prison, realizes the transcendent dimension in him or her, and wakes up. And even a murderer could wake up, and it has happened and does happen, that if they suffer enough, as they will, a moment comes, not necessarily in this lifetime, but for some it has come, they wake up, people who have murdered even more than one person, they wake up and suddenly the unconditioned consciousness emerges, and it emerges because the suffering that they inflicted not only on others but on themselves through their actions was so extreme that the ego self-destructed.
And I would like to talk about that specific, that transcendent dimension. I myself had that experience. Like, I suffered enough and the ego broke. And that's what I was talking about at the beginning of this episode. You know, there's two types of people. There's people who have, the ego has broken, usually through a lot of suffering. And I also realized the suffering that I had caused to other people. And also in our program, you make amends for that. And I went to everybody that I hurt and I apologized for it and I made amends for it. I mean, if I owed people money, I made arrangements to pay them back. One guy that I hurt a lot, he had been in love with me for years, and I had caused him a bunch of problems professionally, and I said I'm sorry, but I'm better. And you know what? He was glad that I got better. He glad that I was no longer hurting myself or hurting other people. He had forgiven me, but he was also glad that I had gotten better. You allow for people to get better. And so this person, that my loved one who relapsed, caused me a lot of pain and suffering and trouble. He caused my husband, he caused his roommates, he caused his coworkers, he caused his parent. Like, he's on a tear of causing all this trauma and suffering to people. But he's so good at convincing others that it's their problem, not his. So maybe he'll hurt enough people, or he'll hurt enough himself, that ego in him will break, or he'll die. And I'm not judging him. I'm recognizing that, because I'm on the other side of it. When you get on the other side of it, you see it clearly. And if you don't yet see it clearly, there's just more work to do. And it doesn't mean that you're better or even worse than anybody else. It's just, the ego has broken in me. That false self has broken in me. That tornado, that storm in a human form has stopped. And this is where I am now. It's a recognition. It's not a judgment. It's an observation. And it's whether, when you see that storm coming, do you want to get in the storm shelter, or do you want to open the doors wide and say, come on in?
And then something emerges, and suddenly they wake up. Now, therefore, I would say, even to call someone a murderer is a judgment. But to say that, to recognize that this person may be dangerous, even to you, that he may need to be confined to prison because he's a danger to others, that's the case.
I mean,
But to impose...
I would like to remind people that at one point in my life, I was considered a danger to myself and others, and they locked me up in a mental institution. And I'm grateful for that. It saved my life. So when you observe that people are a danger to themselves and others, why was I a danger to other people? Because I was an out of control alcoholic. I was going into stores. I went into a Starbucks. I got kicked out of a Starbucks for giving psychic readings. They said, please don't do that here. And then I went back into that Starbucks drunk, and they called the police on me for criminal trespassing. And they arrested me like I had done something wrong. And I said, why are you treating me like I had done something wrong? And they're like, you did do something wrong. This is criminal trespassing. They treated me like a criminal because I was a criminal. They slammed me on the ground like I had really done something wrong. And I had really done something wrong. Yeah, I thought it was no big deal. But they banned me from that Starbucks for a reason. They didn't want me there. They thought I was dangerous enough to not be allowed in that Starbucks. So I was arrested. I got a cute mugshot out of it. It was like an eye-opening thing. Like, oh, yeah, I am a criminal. You know, but usually for people like us, something like that happens. It took a series of events like that. That's why I was deemed a danger to myself and to others, because addict behavior, sexual, all that shit will eventually get people killed. That's why I think what Mr. Marcus does is rather like he's promoting it like it's no big deal. Nope. It gets people killed. It's just a path. It's not just a path, man. He's not being completely honest about the intentions of it all. And that's what I object to. Like, he could say, I'm a druggy swinger, but he doesn't do that. It's a conscious evolution of humanity. No, it's not. People were doing that in the 70s.
To make an identity, nobody is incapable of waking up. Even seemingly very evil people sometimes awaken, only through intense suffering in their case. But anytime we make an identity for a person out of something that they do, that becomes a huge limitation that we impose on them and on ourselves. So you see clearly what a person does, but it's not what this person essentially is.
So judging the behavior of others is completely normal and natural. You know, if you have a baby, you potty train them. You don't let them shit anywhere in the house, or do you? I don't know how other people live. I've never raised a kid. I don't know. Are there families out there that don't potty train their children? Do we accept that in a society? Or do we encourage children to learn how to use the bathroom and a toilet? Probably we encourage people to do that. And for a functioning family unit, when we introduce drugs or alcohol, the whole fucking shit gets rotten. You know, prisons would be very empty if it weren't for drug and alcohol offenses. And so some people think the cure for that is to legalize drugs, and that's just going to create more chaos. My stance on drugs and psychedelics are they're fun to party with, sparingly. But for spiritual growth and development, they're not only not necessary, but they can lead to ego inflation. They can lead to greater addictions. They can lead to spiritual ego and they can really fuck up your life, and not only just your life, but the lives of those around you. Yes, your behavior does have an effect on other people. And it's why, as sober people, we live a life of service. We have a primary purpose. That purpose is to stay sober and to help others achieve sobriety. It's not for everybody. Some people need their drugs. We need to be high. We need to do this. And if you need to drink, if you need to do drugs, then there's healing to be done. But a truly conscious person, a truly healed person, will have no use for drugs or bypassing or spiritual la-di-da at all. Like, it's fun. It's fun. And you can fight me on this. And many people do try to fight me. They're like, we need our drugs. Patrick, you don't understand. And I've said before, like, if I were, like, by the time I was having my spiritual awakening, I was on the other side of my addiction. I realized that drugs led to lunacy, poverty, death, and heartbreak. And some people say, well, Patrick, you just can't handle your drugs. I'm doing fine with drugs. Drugs affect people differently. I'm like, okay, have fun with that. That's an excuse. That's an excuse. They're not necessary. Because when you fuck with your brain chemistry that way, your body has to compensate. Even your brain has to compensate. So the body left alone is fine. If you don't introduce any foreign substances into your body, the brain can heal. You'll be fine. If you can get to a baseline, you will no longer need those drugs. In fact, taking any drugs would upset that delicate balance. You start to be really protective of your vibration and your frequency. And whenever you introduce drugs or anything, it just screws all that up. And then you get enlightened microdosers. Y'all know about enlightened microdosers? Oh my God. But my stance on it is that they're not necessary. I don't care what people do. If you want to do that to yourself, go right ahead. Lord knows I did it all. I did the ketamine. I did the sex parties. I did the MDMA. I did the throuple. I did all that stuff. When anybody gets sick of that shit, I will be here for you. I will totally be here for you. Even Aubrey Marcus, I will totally be for Aubrey. In fact, I offered to go to, at my own expense, to drop everything and go out and fly out there and help Aubrey get sober. And I will stand by that. I will be there for a brother like that when he decides to get sober.
And the same applies to groups of people or humanity as a whole. If we say the world is crazy, which means, of course, human beings are crazy, what we are saying is many human beings alive on this planet are still unconscious and manifest behavior that corresponds to their unconsciousness. They create suffering for themselves and others, and they know not what they do. And then when you hear this in the religious book, it says, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Really, forgive them means don't make an identity for them out of what they do.
Do you hear that? Don't make an identity out of them. It's just their behavior. It's just their behavior. Because underneath all that behavior, especially with somebody sexually acting out or doing lots of drugs or causing other people to suffer, they're suffering themselves. Otherwise, they wouldn't need to be doing all those drugs. Somebody who's suffering a whole lot needs to do drugs constantly.
But don't deny it either. You don't say, oh no, this is fine. He just kills people. He's okay.
I like how Eckhart laughs at stuff that would be disturbing for other people.
So the deeper meaning of forgiving somebody is to recognize that in essence that's not who they are, which does not mean that they do not have to suffer the consequences of their unconsciousness. That happens by itself. And sometimes the karmic consequences of a person's deep unconsciousness. may come through the judicial system, and sometimes through other ways.
Yeah, like my unconscious behavior resulted in me being in a mental institution. It resulted in other legal challenges. But also my loved one's unconscious behavior resulted in a lot of shit for me. And to say that his behavior didn't affect me would be ludicrous. Although people tell me, like, why should that bother you? Why should what other people do bother you? I'm like, because it does sometimes. Especially like anybody who's had to deal with an alcoholic or an addict, a non-sober one in their life, they come in like tornadoes. And then other addicts and alcoholics like, wow, how do people affect you? They do. Unconscious people do affect you. And, you know, the ego's conception of all of this is that with being spiritual, you should be able to handle when people pull shit on you. And, you know, there's a large part of that is true. But when people punch you in the face, it fucking hurts. I don't care how conscious you are. When people punch you, it fucking hurts. And you don't want people, you don't want to be around angry, violent people. And if you do, what the fuck is wrong with you? How high are you?
Not that the judicial system is always just.
All right. That's the end of that one. That's a really good video. And I hope that we got somewhere today. Like it is just fine to judge somebody's behavior. And I think you have to judge people's behavior. You know, when I was rejecting the idea that, you know, I used to feel this way, like we need an ego. We got to have an ego. Oh, I could take these off now. We got to have an ego. You don't understand. I told a master, I said, you know, like I need an ego. What happens if I walk down a dark alley? What's going to protect me? I need an ego to protect me. And he said, don't go down dark alleys. Oh, yeah. Because the ego will have you putting up with shit and then saying that you have to do those things. Like I don't go down dark alleys anymore. I don't hang out with cokeheads or heroin addicts or sex addicts or porn addicts or anything like that because life gets too chaotic. I'm a conscious person. Okay? I like my peace. I like my simplicity. I like my feeling of abundance. My peace is worth protecting. It cost a lot. You guys that know my story, it took a lot to get where I am. And yeah, I don't want people coming into the temple and pissing all over it or misunderstanding it or smashing my statues. And that's what a truly conscious person would do. That's what a truly spiritually evolved person would do. They would have clear boundaries and say, not up in here. All right, so the song that we have today is a song about judgment and judging people. It's kind of a trip hop song. I wrote it years ago, and I put it into Suno AI, and the Merrick helped with the lyrics and some of the music, but it's about judging somebody, and then when they're dead, you only notice the good things about them. It's a lyrically dense song. I want to thank you all for watching this with me today and for helping get this channel monetized. Thank you so much. Tomorrow on Saturday is a special 4-hour and 20-minute event, and it premieres at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. So have fun with that. All right, here's the song, Still Waters Run Deep.
and the silence speaks volumes. He doesn't need to tell the truth. The truth doesn't matter if it's not true for you.
And so he says nothing, even as you call him names. He won't ever fight back or play those stupid games.
Oh yeah, he's made mistakes. He flew too close to the sun, burned wings and broken dreams. Nowhere to go but up.
This man I talk about, he's not rich or free, imprisoned by the loved ones. This is what he said to me.
Still waters run deep, even though I look fast asleep. Journeyed up a mountain steep. It wasn't free, easy or cheap.
When I felt my life was done, poured my heart into the sun, felt like I was a chosen one, maybe even God's only son.
Cross my heart and hope to die. So glad that he opened my eyes. Prayed for him, my soul to keep. He said, still waters run deep.
They said the memorial sure was nice. Nothing bad to say. With his body on ice,
He'll never rise again to see the sun. Secrets die with him, except for this one.
he said.
Still waters run